With a new patch in 1.5 and many of the changes in Marvel Rivals, the meta has dramatically changed based on what it was at the beginning of Season 1. That's why in this video we're going to break down every hero and place them from S to F so that you know exactly what is the best and worst characters in this season. And while I can't make a tier list for every single elo, this is going to be for mid to high elos, so it gives you a point of reference on what people are doing when they're playing the characters too close to their maximum capabilities. Now, I still want to make it clear that you can climb to Eternity or top 500 with literally any character on this list if you get good enough at them, so please don't just say, oh, it's an S tier, I'm going to pick it up, or oh, it's an F tier, I'm going to drop it, because that's just not how this game works. But if you want to climb to Grandmaster, Celestial, or even Eternity, then look no further than the Marvel Rivals Academy. We offer over 3 weekly classes with many of the top tier coaches, including a brand new signed former Overwatch League coach and pro player. We also run consistent coach scrims where you will play in an organized setting against other players of like skill, and then you'll be coached after the fact on things you could do better and how to improve. We also have an in-house tournament system where you can compete for free prizes, and we support multiple regions, PC and console, so it doesn't matter where you are, what platform you play on, you can join the academy. We've had so many players skyrocket in ranked, and you can be next, and we offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free right now in the links down below. Now we're going to start off with the tanks, and the first character I want to talk about is Doctor Strange, a character that did receive a health nerf going into patch 1.5, and he also did receive some smaller nerfs to his shield and to his AoE damage back in Season 1. And these small nerfs are going to eventually add up to something that impacts the character in power level and in pick rate, but that's not true now. Right now, this character is still one of the best, if not the best tanks in the entire game. He's just very reliable at everything he wants to do, from consistent damage to mitigation to the ability to contest open space without falling over and dying. A really powerful ultimate that can wipe enemy teams, kill supports even through support ults, and also has a teleporter that is nearly as powerful as an ultimate, allowing you to recontest. And I would even go as far to say is that if you're not playing Strange, you still need to know how to play Strange, because there's going to be a lot of moments where you need to swap to Strange to recontest, and only Strange can do so. Not to mention, Strange can also wall off certain objective points, and with his teleporter, preventing people from retaking. There's so much power in this character's kit. He's just so much consistent value. He's so integral, and I really do think that he is one of the strongest tanks in the game, a top 2 tank undoubtedly, and he's still an S tier tank. It's pretty clear. He's one of the best characters to learn how to play if you want to climb, because he's just so versatile, so strong. And yeah, the next character we got to talk about is Magneto. Magneto did get pretty interesting going into 1.5 because they decreased the uptime for his curtain, his shield, but they increased his damage. And when you increase the damage of a character like this, it actually ends up being a pretty substantial buff to the character. Good players are going to be able to use the curtain at key moments, and honestly, when you're really dominating on this character, you don't need curtain for a long time. You just need it for specific moments, but an increase in damage allows you to confirm more kills, apply more pressure, build ultimate faster, and Magneto was already incredibly strong. Now, there are some characters like Cloak and Dagger that are better at dodging the Magneto ult now, and she's not going to be quite as relevant in the meta now that we're moving away from triple support, and Cloak and Dagger's ultimate, the thing that was integral for that composition, did get nerfed quite a bit. We'll talk about that a bit later, but still, Magneto ultimate is good at countering a lot of ults, whether it's a Punisher ult, whether it's the beginning of a Star-Lord ultimate, which is really important to stop to give your team time to make a play on it or back away. And then just in general, it's just a powerful ultimate to shut down all supports in their ultimates, like killing Invisible Woman or something like that. And yeah, Magneto's still very, very strong, and he actually got stronger in some ways going into patch 1.5. So he's still an S tier tank, still very strong. Maybe isn't as objectively as strong as Strange in the spots he's good in, but the thing that Magneto is really great at is that he can also enable divers and certain characters that are going in aggressively. Whether you're playing with another mobility heavy tank that's diving in, you bubble them, or you have an Iron Fist that you're constantly giving bubbles. There's ways to get value in more diverse compositions. And yeah, you're not going to have something like a teleporter, and you're not going to have maybe not quite as powerful of an ultimate, but the other parts of his kit make up for that, and he's really strong. And I think he's also probably the best solo tank in the game, so I'm gonna put him in the S tier as well. Now, I gotta mention Thor. Thor is a character that has been slowly creeping up the ranks, and he did get a pretty small buff in patch 1.5 that made it so there was no delay after he uses his awakening, his Super Saiyan mode, and he gets to move right away, which is nice for the character's kit. It doesn't fundamentally break the character or make the character insane. If they got rid of that passive cooldown across abilities altogether, then the character would be super insane. But it did make him a little stronger. It made him feel a little bit better. And honestly, he was already feeling fairly good in general. I do think that he's a still very strong character, and he's really good for booping people out of positions. I think he's good against a lot of the meta tanks. He's good against Strange. He's good against Magneto. He's reasonable against Groot because he doesn't care as much about the walls. He can mark a lot of the dive tanks, specifically characters like Cap, characters like Venom. He can kind of deny them and shut them down and push them away from his team. And he's really flexible, especially if you have a map that has high ground where he can do this hit and run style where he's dropping down, doing something, getting some value, getting some kills, and then going back to the high ground. It's really strong. He plays a really strong, like, hybrid off tank is what we call it, almost like a hybrid DPS tank. And yeah, he's super strong, and now with the tech of dropping your bubble that if enemies leave it, they're going to get slowed and take some damage, and then you pop your ult, you can very reliably either kill squishies or bait out support ultimates. So you combine all those things together, and Thor's really great. Not to mention HELA's really good right now. And HELA's amazing with Thor. I think the HELA and Thor duo may be one of the strongest duos that you can play in ranked. The HELA, Thor, Loki trio, I think, is literally the strongest trio you can play in ranked if nothing is banned. So yeah, Thor is really strong, really good. When you get rezzed like 2 or 3 times in a fight, you're just not going to lose that fight. Even getting rezzed once is just, you're not going to lose that fight. And then there's other characters you can synergize well with right now, whether that's Cap, whether that's Storm. There's a lot of characters that Thor really thrives with right now. So yeah, I'm going to put Thor in the A tier. He's not the best of the best, and I do think you have to work a little bit harder to get him to work. You have to think a little bit more about how you're going to change your playstyle, change how you're playing every single fight. I've been meaning to make an advanced Thor guide breaking down decision making and things like that. So if you want to see something like that, let me know in the comments down below, because I think he's a complex character that has a lot of complex decision making, and he's not as easy to kind of break down how you should play him in every single situation. And next we're going to talk about Groot. And Groot is just a crazy carry tank. Like, he might be the hardest carry tank in the game. He's so freaking strong, but there are a couple of considerations around the character. I think his weakness becomes super apparent against characters that want to crowd control him, namely like Wolverine and Bucky. Characters are pretty frustrating to play against. While there is some counterplay, that's not going to be that reliable, that easy to do. I am going to release a video talking about how to counter some of these things in the future, but yeah, it's really like you're going to want to ban these things at all times. Luckily, once you get to the ban ranks, you should be able to ban them very reliably, very consistently, because everyone wants to ban at least Wolverine. That's the big one that you kind of have to ban. Other characters like Iron Fist now also are kind of threatening to you, so there's more things that are more threatening to you now than before. But even in spite of those things, you can outplay a lot of that with really good positioning. There's a giant amount of skill expression on the character. I really do think that you can take over an entire lobby on Groot in a way that you can't really take over on some other tanks, because Groot can do a ton of damage, make a lot of plays, shut down ultimates. He has an ultimate that might just be one of the best ultimates in the game. Whether you combo it or not, it's just so freaking strong. And yeah, there's a lot of high-ranking Groot players that are just completely carrying lobbies to the point where if you see them, their Groot gets banned, or it did before streamer mode. So yeah, Groot is so freaking strong. I really want to make it clear that this is one of the best characters I think you can pick up and add to your hero pool if you're trying to play another tank, and maybe you want to add another tank to your hero pool. I know that I'm personally going to be adding Groot to my hero pool soon because I think this character has so much potential. And yeah, he's just that good. So I'm going to really put him in the S tier. Maybe not as reliable and consistent as Strange and Mag, but in the hands of someone that knows what they're doing, so freaking strong. And yeah, he's just amazing. Now next is PENI, and I've talked pretty highly about PENI in the past. I still think that PENI is really great. PENI gets to get free kills in the mid fight. She's extremely good, especially on defense, denying space. You can play her on attack as well, just taking over certain areas and then kind of creeping to another area, denying it, taking control, applying consistent pressure. You can deny a lot of ultimates with your grip. You can shut down characters like Strange ultimates over and over again. Outplay divers, and you're really good against a lot of divers. There's a lot to love about this character, and there's a lot people are still learning about this character. A lot of trap spots that you can put mines. I really do think that someone that has a lot of expertise on this character can really just make the entire game about them in a way that other characters can't really do that. And that's pretty oppressive. That's pretty daunting. And yeah, this character's phenomenal. But there's a couple of considerations here. I think number one, PENI can't really be a solo tank. Reasonably, you can't really solo tank on this character. Similar to we talked about Thor, you're not really gonna want a solo tank on these characters because they can't really hold open space that easily. Like, yeah, they can hold space near certain edges and things like that, but they can't stand out in the open when they need to contest objectives or things like that. When they need to drop the point to deny a cap, they're gonna die, like, very quickly. You can't do that. You're pretty prone to CC. So you gotta play your spots, and you gotta wait for the value to come to you, or you gotta wait for the moment to come to you. So that's one of the weaknesses of PENI, in my opinion. That's where she really lacks. I do think that she's still very, very strong, and I think that the win rate reflects how strong she is. But I would say that it's not really a character that I could recommend one-tricking, but in the right spot, she's amazing. So it's hard for me to place her, because reasonably, I think if people really know what they're doing on this character, and they're really good with this character could be like a high A tier. But for the average person, or most people that are going to play this character, they're like B. It's like a B tier character. So it's a little hard. I think you could justify A. I think you could justify B. It really gonna depend on your individual skill level. I'm gonna put her at the bottom of A tier, but yeah, I mean, it's really gonna depend on just how great you are at this character, where she actually deserves to be placed, which is good for the character. I mean, it's a character that is probably worth investing in if you're willing to be committed, but maybe not a character that I would recommend if you're just gonna dabble in her. If you're just gonna play her a little bit, if you're gonna learn a character to flex to in specific moments, and you're not planning on being like a PENI main, learn Mag, learn Strange. Don't learn PENI. PENI's a character, if you're going to commit to PENI, then I would recommend PENI. Okay, next we have VENOM. And VENOM is a character that did get some pretty substantial buffs going into this season, and he's actually really, really good. Especially when people really learn how to use him. They learn how to do the combo with his ultimate. They learn how to just get out when they're under pressure, and they know what threats can really hurt them, CC that can really hurt them. VENOM could be amazing, especially when backed up by other mobility-heavy characters. I mean, you dive in, and you go in, and you create a lot of pressure. You create a lot of attention. You leave a lot of windows for other DPS to go in, some Black Panthers to go in, some Sides to go in, even Iron Fist to go in. You leave these windows for these people to really make some amazing plays. Now, I will say that there are some core weaknesses of this character. Characters like Wolverine are still very difficult to deal with at times, but also characters like Bucky and characters like Namor can be a nightmare for you as well. And I also think Iron Fist is fairly good against you now with his new changes that allow him to do damage based on HP. So there's a lot of things that you have to kind of be afraid of, and I think depending on what gets banned in your games, he's going to be better or worse. Really, if you're amazing at him, you can make him work, of course, but you're really going to want to kind of be strategic about what you're banning, because if you shut down the things that normally people go to deal with you, then you can feel like there's no answer to you, and you can kind of take over a game. I do think that he's actually really strong. I think he's actually very reliable, potentially, but there are some moments where he lacks, and he doesn't really have a perfect composition to fit in right now. It's really hard to place a character like this, to be honest. I still think he's reasonably good, and maybe I'm going to put too many tanks up in the high tiers, but like reasonably, I still think he's actually an A tier pick. I think he's just really, really good. I would say, you know, but maybe between A and B, it's not really clear exactly where he'll be placed. I think based on pick rate, how much he's going to be played, he's probably closer to B, but based on power level, I actually think he's closer to A in the right hands anyways. Now, here's the thing, and we got to talk about him, because the thing is a little bit hard to place right now. It's still rather early in the season, but he's showing a lot of promise as a character that could range from being fairly good to being absolutely busted. He has a ton of potential, and he's extremely strong with a strong ultimate, the ability to constantly brawl, the ability to take over a game by constantly engaging and just applying a lot of pressure, and then being able to get out and being very hard to interact with and kill. He doesn't care about a lot of crowd control and things that other tanks care about, so characters like Wolverine just aren't really an issue for him. And I think his biggest weakness right now is just massive amounts of damage. Things like Punisher with the Rocket team up really just shred him, and I think people are not quite to the stage yet where they understand how to counter him, but some people are learning how to play him well, so those players are having a lot of success, but eventually he'll get reeled back in line. Right now, if I was being kind of conservative, I would put him in the B tier. If I was being optimistic, I would put him in the A. But like I said, he has a lot of potential, and I wouldn't be surprised by at the end of the season, someone cracks him, someone figures out just how strong he is. Really, when you play him with characters that have mobility, can dive, then he gets kind of interesting because you can kind of jump onto like your Venom diving in and engage with them. Or you can play him where you're the initiator and then you're always just going back to your team. You're just using your lead to go back to your team. So there's flexible ways to play him, and I don't think people have fully figured out exactly where he is at his best, but it is obvious that he's very strong. He's probably one of the strongest release characters or new characters. I really do think that he is, you know, far stronger than a character like Reed was at launch. He's stronger than Human Torch is now. He's probably along the same power level as someone like Invisible Woman or close to it. So that's really good company to be in. He's very, very strong. I think he has a lot of potential, and I wouldn't be surprised if he moves up this tier list. I know I'm putting a lot of tanks high up on this list, but a lot of tanks are really good, and they're really competitive. Right now, we have a very interesting meta where I think you can pick a lot of different tanks, and I think that's a good thing. I think having options is great, and really there's just a lot of great options in the tanking category right now, and I wouldn't blame you for picking almost any tank, and we'll talk about that more as we round out the list. Okay, now we got to talk about Banner, and Banner's a tank that is just really, really great. Like, he's still very, very strong. The Iron Man team-up is not quite as strong anymore, and a lot of people might think that that's why this character was played so much, but it really isn't. This character has really high APM, which is actions per minute, meaning that you can do a little bit of everything. You can apply pressure, you can contest high grounds, you can go and deny or mark an enemy DPS, you can, you know, jump the front line. There's so many different things you could do that in the hands of someone that's really good on this character, the sky's the limit. I think at the highest elos and just when people really learn this character, he's dominant. Now, we're kind of running into this interesting spot here where he's getting not banned more than ever. Like, he's slipping through the cracks more than ever. And people are not taking advantage of it because no one that has been playing at a reasonably high level has gotten to practice this character. Like, you just don't get to practice him. So people aren't good enough at him to do all the things that I talked about. It's kind of interesting how a character that is banned so much, especially a character that is fairly difficult to get great with, you need time to get good with him. You need to be able to practice him, and that's not always the case. On paper, is he still an S tier tank? 100%, but in actuality, most people are not going to be able to play him at an S tier level, so that's kind of why he's slipping through the cracks. It's kind of funny. He hasn't been banned, so people haven't practiced him, meaning he's not good enough in the hands of most people, so he's not banned. It's kind of interesting, but still, in the hands of someone that really knows what they're doing, he's still an S tier tank. And I think people are still sleeping on him for these reasons, but really, on paper, this character is still S tier, and I don't really think that there's anything that has been done to him to justify moving him from that S tier slot. He's still one of the most dominant tanks when played at a reasonable level, and he has some of the highest carry potential in the entire game. I gotta really put him in the S tier. And I know that this looks a little strange right now. There's a lot of S tier picks, there's a lot of A tier picks, but really all these tanks are viable in different situations, or they're just viable outright if you're good with them. Like, I think in the S tier, all those tanks can completely take over a game and dominate, or they're very reliable and consistent. In the A tier, very flexible picks, very strong picks in the right hands, and B tier, character with a lot of potential. But now we have the last character, which is Captain America. A character that, once again, I think he kind of slots in at the bottom of A tier. A really strong tank in the right hands, has a lot of potential in the right hands, and he did get a lot better going into patch 1.5 with a lot of the buffs. But really, it's not something that's going to break him necessarily. I think that he still lacks in damage quite a bit, so he needs some amount of someone else helping him. Like, he could be a catalyst for aggression, but he can't be the whole aggression. That being said, he's incredibly good at stalling objectives, applying pressure, staying alive, and getting out. So he's really strong. Like, I don't want to kind of undertone how strong he is. I think in many cases he could be stronger than Venom at doing a similar role. They're also very good together, by the way. But yeah, he's definitely gone up a tier. I think before these buffs he was in B tier. Now, justifiably, he's in A. Venom, before these buffs, was in B tier. Now, he's justifiably in A. I think you got to move these characters up, but it doesn't really make sense to move any other character down when these characters just got stronger. Nothing else got weaker. Just really, really strong characters, really, really strong tanks. So yeah, this is rounding out my tank tier list. Let's move on to DPS. Now, HELA got massively buffed, and at first people were saying that it was a bug that she had no fall off, and then they were saying, no, it was actually included in the patch notes that she has, you know, the ability to 2-tap headshot from range. regardless of the reason, right now, it looks like it's sticking, and HELA is very, very strong. She's so good, and I think that she needs to be respected more now than she has been pretty much all season long, ever since the nerfs at the start of the season. She's really good against a lot of the top characters as well. Any of the flying characters like Storm, like, you don't really have to ban these characters when you're really good at HELA, unless HELA gets banned. She's also very good at outranging characters like Bucky, really good at outranging characters like Namor. She's just really, really strong and reliable. And yeah, very similar to how she was pre-nerf in season 1, where everyone was just banning her. She's very strong. She's not maybe quite that strong, but she's still very freaking strong. Amazing with the Loki and Thor synergy, of course, that we talked about. And I really do think that this character is just insane in the right hands. If you have reasonable aim or great aim, you can just completely carry a lobby. She demands respect. She has good crowd control. She has good mobility, and she has a great ultimate, a checkmate ultimate that can just win the fight if there's no Doctor Strange shield that flies up in your face, or there's no support ultimate. You're just gonna kill people. She's just really great. She's just really, really strong, and yeah, I really do think that she's an S tier DPS, and basically just insanely strong right now. Very, very good, and yeah, should be respected. Now, Human Torch is a new one, and once again, a character that is new, so he's a little bit harder to evaluate than some of these other characters. And while I said that the thing was B and had a lot more, like a lot of potential to go higher, I think that Human Torch also has some potential to be okay, but his ceiling is nowhere near what the thing is. Like, he has more weaknesses. He is an attrition flyer, but he doesn't have a lot of mobility and movement. Like, yes, he can go down and slam, but then once he's there, how does he get out? How does he dodge? How does he move around? He doesn't have any evasion. He's not like someone like a Star-Lord that can fly around. He can't move around fast. He can't flip or evade. So there's weaknesses to him. Now, in the right composition around him, I think he can get value, and you can definitely climb and carry with this character, but really, he's pretty hard to outplay certain types of people. He has some hard situations where he's really just not able to get into the spots he wants to. Characters like HELA can just completely shut him down, and it's hard for him to do enough to carry. A lot of his damage can be ignored and avoided. So you combine all these things together, and I think that he's fine, but, you know, a lot less ceiling than some of these other characters. So I'm actually going to put him in the C tier respectively. Now, Iron Fist did receive some pretty interesting changes that kind of changed how the character plays a lot, where he's not as effective against squishies, but he's a lot more effective against tanks. So this really means that he's very good in a brawl comp when you're trying to trade blows on the front line, but he's not so great at being like this assassin that goes into the back line and like tries to 1v1 a support anymore. So his playstyle changes, but honestly, it's better because it allows him to cycle more. He's going to be in the fight a lot more. He doesn't have as many uptime problems as he once did. And he's not putting himself in as much risk as he was before when he was fighting in the back line where something else could like stun him or whatever after he used his block. So there's a lot of pluses to this, and I think that overall it's going to feel like a buff, but in some cases he's not going to be able to carry as hard as he could before. In more organized play with organized resources, I think he actually gets better. And then when, you know, you're playing this like random chaotic just normal game, he gets worse, which is interesting. It's like in the lower elos and just in the random games, he gets worse, which I think is the place that a lot of people complained about him. And in the situations where people were like, oh, he's not good anymore in high elo, now he's better. He's legitimately good, which is kind of a good, I think it's a good change because it does that. It makes it so that the people that were frustrated with them, the supports that were frustrated with him in any elo, they are not feeling quite as frustrated with him anymore. And then in higher elo, he's a bit better. Although tanks, you have another character that you have to really watch out for. He's looking to abuse you quite a bit. And with tanks so strong, right? We talked about how many are good. I can't just look down on a character that is strong against tanks. I don't think he can be played in every single spot, but I think the spots he's good in, he's actually very, very good this season, this patch. So I'm actually going to put him in the A tier. He'll probably go into the bottom of A tier, but I actually do think he's legitimately good, and he's good against a lot of freaking tanks. Being able to bully tanks is great, and tanks are so strong, and some of them are hard to interact with. So a character that can really just take over and bully them to this extent, I do got to give him mad props here, and I got to put him in the A tier respectively. Now, Hawkeye did receive quite a bit of buffs. Now he's better against some of the dive characters that were jumping him. He has more HP. He got more, like, less cooldown on his knockback. So there's things about him that are really good, but still there's vulnerabilities to the character. And I think that's kind of why they buffed him. He had a really low win rate before the buffs, and I wouldn't imagine that it's going to be sky high anymore. His best meta was a triple support meta. That's really where he would thrive, because he gets to not be under pressure and he gets to take pot shots, and he wasn't really even succeeding in that environment. Now there's more DPS, there's more hyper mobility DPS, there's more hyper mobility tanks. A lot of things are going to be jumping him, so that keeps him in check. Is he still strong? 100% in the right hand, someone that can really aim on this character, yes. But he does have his vulnerabilities, he does have his weaknesses, and it's a lot more than a character like HELA. I think he's less reliable than a character like HELA with more weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Does he have really high upside? Absolutely. He can dink characters, he can one-shot them, he can deny like Cloak and Dagger ult, mid ult. There's some nice upsides to him. But with a rather weak ultimate and overall inconsistent uptime and clear vulnerabilities, I'm going to put him in the B tier. A character that has high upside, but maybe not the highest, and does have these weaknesses. But I wouldn't sleep on him quite as much as you did in Season 1 before the patch, because he is just going to be all around better, harder to duel. Extra HP is always good on a character, so yeah. Now, here's Iron Man, and Iron Man actually did get quite a bit of a buff without the Gamma, which is interesting, and I do actually think that Iron Man was even fine without the Gamma in the previous seasons. I know a lot of people really just slept on him and didn't really respect him, but Iron Man is more tricky to play than you might think, where you have to really think about how you're going to position in a safe spot around natural cover on the high ground. You got to make sure that you're not sucking resources from your team and demanding to be card pocketed, but you attack from a different angle and you attack with constant pressure. Plus you have an ultimate that literally can just one-shot a lot of supports out of their ultimate. So he's really good, and I really do think that his ultimate is just like loads better than the Human Torch ultimate. Doesn't require synergy or combo to be good, and he has a little bit more tools. I actually think that this character is reasonably good even without the Gamma team up, and I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on him. They're sleeping on him quite a bit, and I think he's actually really good and can be played more. Yes, there are powerful counters to you. Spider-Man's annoying, Iron Fist can be annoying, HELA can be annoying, right? But tanks can't really interact with you all that much, and supports can't really interact with you all that much either. So yeah, I actually am pretty high on Iron Man. I'm going to place him higher than other people might place him on their list. I'm going to put him in the B tier. I think he's actually reasonable. I think he's actually good. And yeah, I'm going to put him in the B tier respectively. Now we have MAGIK, who did get a buff and a nerf. So now her demon isn't going to do as much damage, but she's going to have her ultimate faster. And while this does mess with some of her combos and things like that, what this doesn't do is mess with her core playstyle that is being played mostly now, which is her brawling a lot. She's brawling a lot more on the front line. She's fighting a lot more with her tanks, and then she's looking for core moments to go in the back line. Now she'll be able to get her ultimate faster and kind of cycle off of her ultimate more. So it changes up her playstyle, but it was already a direction that a lot of Magiks were playing. It kind of reinforces the playstyle that was already kind of being adopted by a lot of Magiks, but she's not really going in the backline all the time, not really going for these one-on-one dive plays. She's kind of playing on the front line a bit more, and this kind of enables that a bit more as well. I think MAGIK is still very strong. She has a lot of carry potential, and she can really take over a game, but she's not, you know, uncounterable. She definitely has some polarizing matchups, but with a character that had this high of a win percentage and really didn't get changed all that much fundamentally, I don't think that you should be sleeping on MAGIK. A character that really rewards you for really learning how to play her, but maybe not a character that you can one trick necessarily. I think you can play her in a lot of situations, but you want to be kind of strategic with what you're banning, things that can shut you down, things like Namor, things like Bucky. But if those things are shut down, then you're much more free to just take over a lobby. And yeah, I really do think that she's very strong. I'm actually going to put her in the A tier. Yeah, character that you should definitely not sleep on. Now we're moving on to Reed, and Mr. Fantastic is a character that did receive some changes. Not everyone loves the changes that he got, and I think they kind of overcomplicated how they were changing the character, where the character doesn't feel like grossly better than he did before. And yeah, and some people are even claiming that he's worse. Whether that's a bug or not is unclear, but really Mr. Fantastic is not, you know, substantially better than he was, and I think that there are places for him, there are spots for him. He has a lot of uptime, he's hard to interact with, but he's not gonna be something that is going to be meta, in my opinion, for any foreseeable future unless someone cracks something very particular. He's really good as an anti-dive character, and I can see him in compositions where he plays a pseudo second tank, because that's what he is. He's kind of like a second tank. He's like a second brawl tank, but in a lot of cases I think it's probably just better to just play that second tank instead of playing Reed. And playing 2 tanks plus Reed I think is a little bit too lacking in pressure. You don't have enough offensive pressure to bait out support ultimates and things like that. So yeah, I don't really get playing him over other things. Can you make him work? Sure, but you could also just make another tank work in his spot most of the time if you're playing him in that tank slot. So I do think he's reasonable, don't get me wrong. I just don't think that he's strong enough to justify, you know, playing over a lot of other characters. And when you have characters that are kind of similar, they play a similar role. I think the Thing kind of plays a similar role to him in a lot of ways, and I would just think that the Thing is going to be better in that tanking slot most of the time. But maybe you could play them together, and there's some interesting brawl styles of play there. I will say that he has potential here, and with some of the new additions to the tanking roster and just the changes in general, I could see some changes that are good. And he's also just frankly really good against dive, hyper mobility, you know, Venom and Cap compositions he's really good against. I think I'm going to put him at the bottom of B, but I could also make the argument for C as well. I think he's fine. I do think that they should have probably buffed his ultimate a bit more than it was buffed, but at least it's better now, and the character is, you know, he's fine. Now it's Moon Knight, and yeah, I am pretty low on Moon Knight right now, more low than you would think for a lot of reasons. I think his best meta was definitely triple support, which is a meta that we're going to see a lot less of, if any at all. So when you take away his best meta, that's a pretty big deal. He also did receive a nerf that I think was probably necessary because his ultimate was a little bit too strong. But when you take away the triple support where people were stacking, and you take away the best meta and you enable a meta where things are, you know, hyper mobility and there's a lot more Psylocks and Star-Lords, he's gonna get feasted on a lot. And honestly, he wasn't really winning all that much even in the last meta, and I really do think that this is probably gonna feel like the worst time for him in general. Can you win with him? Yes. Is he really good in some comps? Yes. But I actually think that this is, you know, a rather weak time for him. And especially if we talk about mid to high elo, he's going to struggle a lot. He really is going to struggle a lot. You're going to get farmed a lot by, like I said, a lot of characters, a lot of DPS. You don't want to fight almost any of them. You really don't want to fight any of them. And yeah, I don't really recommend him as a character you could one-trick this season at high levels. He's a good flex pick to whip out, but this one might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'm putting him in the C tier. I think he's in the C tier. This is for mid to high elo, but yeah, he's not that great right now, unfortunately. Namor, and yeah, I think a lot of people hear how high I am on this character. I think he is just so reliable at not only denying people that are in your backline, but also just taking really aggressive off angles and just applying a ton of pressure. His projectiles are easy to hit. They do so much damage. I mean, you throw one squid down, hit your primary into your alternate fire, you anger the squid, you just kill someone instantly. That's with one squid. With two squids, they die like, you know, almost faster than instantly. You could kill another person. You have a powerful ultimate that can be comboed with things. You're just really hard to die because you can go invulnerable in your ball. There's so much about him that's just so difficult to interact with for so many characters, and he's flexible and good in multiple different styles of play. And that's even without the Luna Synergy. I think even without the Luna Synergy, he's like an A tier pick. With the Luna Synergy, he's like a freaking S tier pick. This character's so strong. I really do think that he's also the strongest DPS to play across like almost all low elos and even into the high elos. Like, he's just good. Like, he's so dominant in every rank. I really cannot stress how good this character is, and you don't even need great aim to access what is so much impact on this character. But you got to make sure that you're changing up how you're playing depending on the composition. If you're sitting in your back line and they're playing freaking HELA Bucky, you know, and just spamming, you need to go on further off angles. You need to challenge further off angles. You need to get value out of the fact that you can set up a lot of pressure from an off angle and you're hard to flush out of these positions. If you're just sitting in your back line, you're going to lose in the head-to-head to characters like HELA that are better at you at spamming from range. So, you know, if you're up against like a Black Panther, you can sit in your back line and shut him down, but it has to change depending on what you're up against. So that's really important. But if you understand that fundamental and you know how to do that and change your play style, Namor is insane. He's so freaking strong. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of Luna Snow bans, and it kind of messes with Namor as well. We're also seeing direct Namor bans, but in a world where neither of them are banned, you should be playing them 100%. It's so freaking good. It's just so good. Next up is PSYLOCKE, and PSYLOCKE is a DPS that is so freaking strong. A character that did fall a little bit behind when we talk about the triple support meta, and I really think that's just because the ultimate wouldn't get consistent value. It was hard to assassinate things where there was just so much ample resources. Although she could still get value. She had high actions per minute. She could still get value in that regard. PSYLOCKE is just really great right now. Being able to attack from multiple directions. Good with a variety of compositions. Either playing on the front line to just apply pressure. Or going in the back line and going for assassinations and diving with your team. Your mobility heavy tanks. There's a lot of versatility in her kit. And she's also really good against flyers. Perhaps the best character against any flyer because you can fight them from a weird angle and you have hit scan fire. So, you know, whether it's a Storm, an Iron Man, you know, a Human Torch, it doesn't matter. PSYLOCKE's really great there. So I actually just want to put this character in S tier. I think that she's that good and she's been slept on for too long. A lot of people can't play her anywhere near her ceiling, and I think that's one of the reasons people are kind of sleeping on her. Similar to we talk about Banner, people just aren't playing them well enough to justify the ban. But I think this character is so freaking good and just could take over a game. I'm going to put her all the way in the S tier. I just think she's that freaking good right now. Now we have Black Panther, a character that has a lot of potential to carry a game. He bursts really hard. He can potentially just kill supports very, very quickly. And yeah, I mean, he's just generally fairly strong at doing this one cycle that's really good. But he does have a lot of weaknesses. There's a lot of ways to interrupt his cycling. There's a lot of ways to kill him during his cycle. There's windows during his cycle that he's vulnerable to crowd control, and he can be outskilled. There are characters like Loki that are hard to play against. There are a lot of supports that are frustrating to play against, like Invisible Woman. There's no regs on the character. There's a lot about the character that I think any Black Panther player will tell you. He's not as free value as he seems, and there's a lot of threats to him. Now, if you get great enough with him, you can make him work, but you're really working very hard for some value here. And I think that right now he's kind of struggling more than he has in a while, and he's not the most reliable. So I'm going to put him in the bottom of B, a character that can, you know, pop off and carry in the right context. Especially if he has the MAGIK team up, he can really go crazy because you can play much more risky and still get out. But yeah, he does suffer from some of the uptime problems that Iron Fist has or used to have, and it's just way too easy to feed on this guy, even if you're fairly good. And characters like Namor just make your job like a nightmare. Like, it's actually, you know, terrible. Namor, PENI can do it as well. You know, Creed can do it as, I mean, there's a lot of characters that can. So yeah, I'm gonna put him in B tier. He has potential to carry, but a little bit tricky. Now, this is where things get a little strange. Scarlet Witch and is gonna be a weird one. We're also doing Black Widow right after that. Now, this is where things get a little interesting. Scarlet Witch and Black Widow, two characters back to back that I think there's a lot of perception about how these characters are good or bad, and I think that these characters are legitimately better than they seem. Like, they're legitimately better. There are people that kind of dominate on these characters. There's a video you can watch on Kenzo's channel of me getting completely bodied by Kenzo's Black Widow. Scarlet Witch, I know, has high carry potential, especially if you have the Magneto team up. It's great. She's actually really good at stopping divers and marking divers. So these characters have legitimate use cases. If you're really cracked mechanically, you can make it work on Black Widow. If you know how to play Scarlet Witch and people don't play the counters to you, high burst damage, you can make it work. But really, these characters, I think, thrive in the ranked environment where people are not trying to counter you. They're not caring to counter you. And if you're really, really good, you can, like I said, you can make them work, but they do lack a lot of the tools to be super reliable and consistent. Still, they can take over a lobby in the right hands, and so I think that I got to give them credit there. But I don't want to place them somewhere really high to just say, like, these characters are meta representatives, they're strong, whatever. I think you could probably maybe justify the bottom of B. I'm going to put them at the top of C, and you might be like, Mills, why are you placing these characters so low? I want to make it clear. I think these characters are much better than a lot of people think these characters are. I really, really do. I understand Scarlet Witch can completely shut down, you know, a diver that thinks they can get away, but they can't, and that diver can't interact with a Scarlet Witch. And Black Widow makes characters like HELA and even HAWKEYE, like, fear from range in a way that they just don't normally fear from range and can get burst damage in. But there's a lot of requirements from you to get value at the highest level. Now, Scarlet Witch is a little bit different because I think in most lower ranks, she's actually really, really good. Like, if we're talking about under the diamond rank or even under grandmaster rank, I'll probably put her in like B, maybe even low A. But if we're talking like mid to high elo, especially high elo, you got to be really, really creative to get to this character to work. You got to be really, really good to get this character to work. That's why there's so few Scarlet Witches. They're not going to be reliably meta, but I do think that team up does give her a little bit more. So I could probably justify, you know, maybe her being bottom B because of that team up, and it's something that's really common. Magneto's really like it, having more offensive power. But for Black Widow specifically, I think that she's fine in the right hands, but is really she requires a lot from you. And let's be real here. If you're mechanically good enough to dominate a Black Widow, you would dominate way harder on HELA. Like, you can't, even a Black Widow main will tell me that. There's no way that you can deny that. So, yeah, I mean, it requires a lot from you for so little. I still think that she can carry and can dominate in the right hands, but it's going to be dependent on the situation. Scarlet Witch gets a little bit extra plus because of that synergy. I think is really, really good. So yeah, now we're in the Bucky territory. Now, I think before this video came out, I had a video talking about Bucky, talking about how people are really frustrated with the character and what I would do to change him and things like that. But as it stands right now, I do think that this character justifies an S tier pick. And there's a couple of reasons for why he's so good right now. He's just very solid, and he's just good against so many different things. There's so many characters in the roster that he has favorable matchups against. And he's also just a character that is hard to kill. I mean, 275 HP, he's going to gain 30, or he's going to gain 40 or 50 depending on his ability. And, you know, 2 of his abilities give him 40 shields, and 2 of his abilities give him 50 shields. So, yeah, he's really, really hard to kill, hard to duel, really hard to contest. A lot of tanks really have a very difficult time dealing with him. Whether it's Groot, whether it's Thor, whether it's freaking Venom. There's a lot of characters that really don't like interacting with him. He has the ability to shut down ultimates towards his ceiling, shut down Eye of Agamotto. There's a lot of DPS that are afraid of him. Even PSYLOCKEs have a hard time with him. Magiks, Iron Fist, Black Panthers, Scarlet Witches. Yeah, I mean, he's not great against long-distance DPS, characters like HELA, for example, and even Namor to an extent. And he's not great against flyers that can fly really far away because he has fall off with his projectile. It's just hard to hit from range. But those characters aren't really meta anyways besides HELA. And I think that HELA is a character that kind of keeps him in check. And I talked about this before, but Bucky is a character that got a buff because he was kind of performing poorly in Season 1. And this was the season that HELA and Hawkeye were insanely busted. Very, very strong. 2 characters that are the best at fighting against Bucky. So in a world where both those characters got nerfed going into Season 1, and then Bucky gets buffed, it was probably too much buffs for a character that his 2 biggest ops were getting nerfed, right? And it's interesting how other characters that are predominant in the meta that are good against your main can change how good that character is. So I think that's kind of a classic example of what happened to Bucky, and he probably did get a bit overtuned with some of his aspects, and right now he's just very reliable and very good. You don't even have to be that skilled at him to get a lot of value with him, but if you're really skilled with him, you can kind of take over a game. I will say that with his ultimate, though, not as broken as a lot of people think. You have to be very patient about when you use it, because unlike ultimates like PSYLOCKE's ultimate, for example, you put yourself at a fair bit of risk if they defensive ult or they like pocket the person you're on, because you're flying literally into their team and you could just die, get focused and killed. You don't get to just get out freely. Like if you pop a Psylocke ult and they pop a defensive ult, you cancel, dash away, you're good, right? You're completely safe. So there's not the linear risk here. There is a really high reward, but like whether you kill 3 people with the Psylocke ult or kill 5 people with the Bucky ult, you won the fight anyways. It doesn't really matter. So yeah, anyways, I still think even in spite of that, he's super, super good, mainly due to all of his crowd control and things like that. But that's enough about Bucky. I'm slotting him in the S tier, kind of towards the bottom. Now, Spider-Man did get some pretty interesting buffs here. He got some nice buffs. He moves a lot faster. And I think he's just better than he's been in a while. He's better than he's been in quite some time. He got a pretty substantial buff to his kit, and he just feels better to play. He has more uptime with the bunny hop tech as well. He's good, but he does require someone to be playing him in the right hands, and he also kind of requires the right bands, right? He's not good against Bucky. He's not good against Namor. He's really good in certain situations. I think he's good against flyers, but there are a lot of moments where Spider-Man kind of you know, really suffers. Remember in the previous tier list, I put him towards the absolute bottom. I don't think he's there anymore, but I don't think he's like the most dominant character ever. If we're talking mid to high elo, I would probably put him like low B right now is where I'd put him. I think he's reasonable. I think he's okay, but he's not great, and he does have a lot of vulnerabilities and weaknesses. So yeah, I'm putting him in the bottom of B. A character that does reward you for getting really good with them, and you could definitely climb to the highest ranks of play with them. If you get good enough with them, it's just most likely very hard on the character, harder than it is on other characters to do the same thing with. So yeah, I'm putting him in the B though. One of the things that's the best about him though is his ultimate's really, really strong, because it gives you so much shield, health. You're going to be able to clutch up moments where other characters can't. You're also good at pulling people off maps on certain maps, so he gets extra bonus points there. So yeah, I'm putting him in the B tier. I think he's actually reasonable. Now, Squirrel Girl is a character that I am very high on. I think this character is very, very strong. I think she's really, really good. And I think a lot of people sleep on her, especially on maps like Tokyo. You're really good at applying a lot of pressure, forcing people out of positions. The Spider-Man team up is busted. I know that's just like a random tidbit, but it's actually so freaking good. You can cancel a lot of ults that way. But really, Squirrel Girl is just a very reliable source of damage. Her ultimate's far better. She's very, very good in a lot of maps and a lot of points. I think she's an amazing flex pick to pick up, and I think a lot of people sleep on her. She's a character that applies a lot of pressure from range, but she's also really good when people chase her and want to take the fight to her. She can outplay a lot of characters that want to duel her directly. She's fairly good against divers. She can interrupt a lot of characters. She can get free picks. She can apply so much freaking pressure. There's a lot to love about this character. I think there's a lot to love about this character, and I think if more people put time into her, they would realize just how hard she can carry in the right hands. You push up to a choke, your ultimate just can win a fight for you for free. If people push into you or fight you in a choke, it's only a matter of time before they just lose somebody and you just get a free fight win. Yeah, I'm putting her in the A tier. I think she's actually fairly better than like all these characters, even Hawkeye. I think she's actually very, very strong. So I'm putting her in the A tier because it's my list. Star-Lord. Yeah, Star-Lord I'm putting in the S tier. I think Star-Lord is very, very good. He's one of the best DPS in the game. And it's kind of similar to all the reasonings for PSYLOCKE. Capable of being independent, capable of hypermobility, capable of fighting by themselves. The benefit, though, of Star-Lord, and I think the way that he edges it out here, is that Star-Lord is really good right now, especially with the synergy between Mantis and Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock is extremely good right now, and this trio is one of the best trios in the game. Just giving Mantis and Star-Lord free reses is just insanely strong, because like if all of y'all die, y'all could all respawn and get like another fight, another way to contest. It's just so freaking good. Star-Lord is much better in, you know, now that we've moved away from triple support, because his ultimates are just going to be more reliable, and he's going to be able to get more picks in the mid fight. When there's more DPS that are seeing play, he also has more people to duel, which is what he wants. He doesn't want to just be shooting at a glob of HP, which is what he was doing a lot before the patch. And he's good at contesting a lot of flyers and shutting them down. He's also just really good against almost anything. Like, I don't think he has any super bad 1v1 matchups, and he has really high skill expression. So with a good synergy, good consistent ultimate, good consistent dueling capabilities, flexible mobility, there's a lot about him. And similar to what we talked about PSYLOCKE, both these characters are very good, and they can slot into basically any team composition, and only your skill is going to hold you back on these characters. So I would highly recommend them. I think they're very, very strong. You're going to need a good amount of mechanical skill to reach the levels that you need to carry on this character consistently. But yeah, mechanics are important, and if you get those mechanics, you can carry on this character. Now, Storm is a character that has been changed quite a bit. A character that now is not as good at fighting by herself, but is better at enabling her teammates a bit more. She had fall-off damage reduction and some other damage reduction, but she increases the damage of the people that she's near, so she plays better in a group. Does this character still demand a ban? Most likely, yes. Still a character that is ban-worthy, a character that is very, very strong, and I think that she's not much weaker than she was previously, so yeah, she's very strong. However, and I want to make this clear, there's a lot more ways to counter her than there have been in the past. Namor, fairly good against her, actually. HELA, very good. Star-Lord, very good. PSYLOCKE, very good. So when there's a lot of these characters that are really good against her, I actually think that in the mid to high elos, she's not as justifying of a ban as she was in the past. Maybe people will keep banning her. Maybe she's a character that people just don't know how to play well enough to get full value out of because she was banned so much. But really, I think that she's probably still a bit overbanned right now. And yeah, I would even go as far to say that she might not even be S tier. Maybe that's a little sacrilege. It's also weird putting so many different DPS in the S tier. I know this entire list is really top heavy. There's so many really strong and viable things right now, so it's hard to place things lower. But yeah, albeit all these DPS are good for different reasons. Like I could drop them all down to A tier, but then we have the same problem. They're all good for different reasons. I think Storm is still very, very strong, but she's not like definitively the best DPS anymore. And I think she has a lot of characters that are good against her in the meta right now. So yeah, still a very powerful ultimate, still consistent damage, and still in against some characters hard to interact with. She's fairly hard to interact with by tanks, so that's a huge plus to the character. So yeah, I'm gonna put her here, but I'm also knowing that I'm gonna add another character to the S tier, so it's a little weird to put more characters in the S tier, but I'm going to do it, so whatever. Punisher is good. Punisher's strong. I think he's an A tier character, especially if we talk about with the synergy with Rocket, being able to punish Groots, being able to punish Doctor Stranges, being able to punish the Thing, especially very good against the Thing. I think Punisher's just reliable. His shotgun is actually so freaking strong, like just so freaking strong. It's crazy. Yeah, he's just a very reliable form of damage, and he's just really good against tanks. Once again, when you're good against tanks, I gotta put you pretty high up. So yeah, now we're moving on to Wolverine, and once again, I just have to kind of look at my list and just realize how much I have in the S tier, because I'm about to put another character in the S tier. But I mean, that's just the way it is. Wolverine is an S tier character. Now, will Wolverine be played? No, because he's always banned. He's the character that is most likely the strongest out of all these, because he just demands respect in a way that these other characters doesn't, and he forces the entire game to be played around him. When you have a good Wolverine, your tanks have to play completely different around him, and maybe they just lose to him. So he's just always banned, so it's kind of hard to put him in there. But yeah, I think these DPS are just all cut above the rest. And to be honest with you, Wolverine should be like super S tier. Maybe I put him down here and I put him in this tier, which is the banned tier, because he's banned. That's it. He's banned. Like, he's just so good that he just requires it. If you let Wolverine slip through the cracks, you better hope that there's no one on the enemy team that even kind of knows what they're doing on this character, because if they do, they're gonna bully your tanks over and over again. And there's a lot of tanks that you just can't play against him. Like, if you're a Thing player, sure, but are you gonna solo tank Thing? Because your other tank is gonna get gripped 24/7. So yeah, he's in the banned tier. I think all these DPS are very, very strong, but he's more warping than all these DPS. So yeah, I'm putting him in the banned tier. Now next is Adam Warlock, a character that did receive a massive damage buff and also buff to his soul bond as well. And really, he's amazing this season. Very high DPS, capable of getting pickoffs, capable of contesting DPS, capable of dueling DPS. The only thing that he doesn't have is a lot of up heals or like raw heals. So you can't play him with every support composition. I think like Adam Rocket's a little weird. Adam Loki's a little weird unless you're playing a triple support. But he can be played in triple support. I think if you're going to play triple support, Adam is like a necessary piece in that composition, or one of the necessary pieces in that composition. But really, Adam is also very good with the synergy. He's just very strong in general. I think he has very high carry potential. And I think that people's perception have kind of warped around Adam, because really Adam wasn't that bad last patch. People just kind of just wanted constant heals, constant ultimates that keep you alive. People just like the feeling of that. But really, Adam wins the game by just applying so much pressure. And when you have so much extra pressure, you can force ultimates in the mid fight. You can get picks in the mid fight. And yeah, I mean, Adam's just really great. He kind of adds a whole half of a DPS to your damage output and your playmaking output. So yeah, he's really, really great. Maybe not reliable enough and played in enough compositions to justify an S tier pick, but I think he's very, very good. He does also require great mechanical skill. He's not going to give you any value for free, so you're going to need good mechanics to kind of access his power. Not a reason to put him any lower, but it's something important to note. I'm going to put him in the A tier. I think he's very good. Mantis is a character that is also still very strong. I think a lot of people stopped playing her as much when she got the mobility nerf, mainly just due to how she felt, not because of her power. Because while yes, you can't stay alive against everything with her ultimate, other ultimates kind of got moved back in line a little bit. They're a little bit more expensive now, and even though Mantis did get some nerfs as well, she's still great. And she adds a lot of offensive capabilities in a similar way that we talked about with Adam Warlock. Offensive capabilities are really important because you can just win fights for free. And I know it doesn't feel as good to like You know, sometimes when you pop an ultimate and win a fight, it actually doesn't feel as good as popping a Luna Snow ultimate and surviving like a million ultimates being dumped on you. But it's just as impactful. And Mantis is so damn strong. I really can't just kind of deny how good she is and how much carry potential she has. But once again, you need mechanics to access a lot of that. It's not going to be a character that's going to give you any value for free. You also have to have a pretty aggressive temperament. Like, there's actually a lot of DPS players that would get a crazy amount of value just playing Mantis with the DPS mechanics and the offensive temperament, playing a character that has the tools to be aggressive and also get a lot of value with healing as well. I'm putting her in the A tier. She's very, very good, very reliable. Now, Luna Snow, in my opinion, is the best support right now. Kind of undoubtedly so. She's so good with a really powerful ultimate. Yes, it's harder to build now, but it's just lasting so long, which is amazing. Plus, it just gives you the ability to add damage, which can be comboed with stuff like Namor ultimate, which is really, really good to just one-shot people more reliably. Luna is also just able to heal just so many people, a lot of raw healing, but also being able to give a snowflake to a lot of mobility heavy characters, so she can enable a character like Storm easy, any flyer easy, even characters like PSYLOKKE and Star-Lord, Iron Fist. Like, she's good at all of that, which is really great to have a support that can kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting, and then you can like open up the spot for a more flexible support, you know, maybe like an Adam, maybe like a Mantis, maybe like a Loki. So I really do like that she kind of provides all that you need for her. And then also, she has a really great crowd control. That's a skill base that can deny ultimates. Like, if you get really good with it, you can shut down Eye of Agamotto's, but you could also just completely outplay, you know, Black Panthers in your back line and things like that. And then her synergy with Namor is just a top tier synergy. It's so freaking strong. So you combine all these things together, she is the best support right now, but she's going to get banned more because of that. So you're probably going to have another pick in your back pocket to be played when she does get banned. Now, Loki is a character that, while his ultimate is harder to generate now, he did get more bullets in his primary, and that's going to increase his uptime, but really it doesn't matter all that much. Loki was phenomenal previously, and he's still going to be phenomenal. A lot of people are kind of waking up to the value of Loki, how good he potentially is, where you can play a high ground position, keep up your team, apply pressure, make your team almost impossible to dive. You're almost impossible to dive yourself. And then you just have a lot of flexibility with the plays that you're making. You know, you apply so much extra pressure, but you also get to deny so many just even ultimate plays, because Totem is perhaps the strongest single ability in the game. And then you have your ultimate that can be used in a lot of flexible ways. It's not just always best to just be like, I'm going to copy a support ultimate and prolong this fight. There's sometimes they don't have a defensive ultimate, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go copy a Star-Lord ultimate and just kill them right here and win the fight for my team. I'm going to copy a Storm ultimate and just wipe the enemy team. They don't have any counterplay. Like, understanding when you can just decide to win the fight right now, or maybe you need to prolong the fight to build other ultimates and give your team more time to make a play because the fight isn't going to be resolved so easily. That's a call that you can make, and it's one of the reasons why Loki has so many top 100 players that play Loki and one-trick Loki, because he's just that strong. He's so freaking good, and he has such a high carry potential. I would highly, highly recommend you grinding this character. And also, one of my buddies that is an Eternity level Loki, he has a guide on Loki on his channel. I would highly recommend it. I'll put his links in the description down below. So if you really want to learn how to pop off on this character and really learn everything you need to know about this character, I would highly recommend checking it out, because it's just so freaking good. It's so strong. Now, with all that being said, I'm putting him in the A tier. He's also a character like Adam Warlock that can't be played with every composition, but yeah, he's really good in the compositions you can play him with, and he's also great with the HELA, THOR, Loki synergy. So good. Getting res for free, amazing, especially when you have really powerful abilities like Totem. It just becomes completely insane. completely insane. Jeff the frickin' Land Shark. This is kind of the funny thing about Jeff, is that the optimal way to play Jeff in high levels is kind of to play him like a DPS. And I actually mean that, where you're playing really aggressive off angles or even flanks. You're impossible to kill and interact with. You're applying a lot of pressure, and you're just forcing attention. And if people just completely ignore you, you just like literally build up an ultimate and ult, or you just kill a support. He's like a hypermobile DPS. That's what he is. And in a lot of ways, he's just better than a lot of DPS. Like, he's actually legitimately better. I think he's so freaking strong. And yeah, his only real downside, though, is you got to play him in the DPS slot. You can't play Jeff as a support, like, it's gonna be really hard to play Jeff Luna or, like, you know, Jeff Mantis, right? And then your Jeff is always flanking and you only have Mantis heals. It's not gonna really work. But if you play Adam, I mean, even like Adam Loki Jeff or like Adam Luna Jeff, then you're playing only one DPS, and then Jeff, he could be really good. And I think Jeff is actually really freaking strong if you think about him as a DPS. Don't think about Jeff as a support. Literally think about him as a DPS. Think about him like he's a Spider-Man, like he's a freaking Scarlet Witch, like Reed is a tank. You think about him in that way, and he's actually good. He's legitimately good. I'm putting him in the B tier because he's actually literally good as a DPS. Like, he's actually better than a lot of these DPS. I think he's actually better than a lot of B tier DPS. So yeah, really, really good. Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger did receive some changes. Now doesn't have the ultimate. It's the same power level as it was before. Harder to interact with, though. You move a lot quicker, and you also can blind people for longer. So that there's buffs to the character. The character has gotten better in some ways and worse in others. Not as meta warping, though. Like, in the triple support meta, she was so meta warping, or they were so meta warping, that it really kind of demanded a pick, and it really warped the meta around them. And when something warps the meta around you, you end up like Wolverine. Like, you end up in the ban tier, but mainly you just end up in a place where you have to be S tier because of the sheer volume of pick rate, right? Cloak is still good, and in a lot of ways is gonna feel better to play than they did before, but they are not gonna be as meta defining as they were before. And so I think the character is still very good and phenomenal. I don't want to kind of undersell how good this character is, because they are really, really good, but they're not as, like, just objectively dominant as they were before. So I'm going to put them in the A tier as a character that I think is really, really good, really, really worth playing, really worth learning, really strong, and a great character to flex to because they're not really mechanically demanding. So if you play like a tank, or you play, maybe you play a DPS that's like, I don't know, Iron Fist, Squirrel Girl, whatever, something that's not aim-centric, and you want to learn how to play a support, you don't really want to go from like Squirrel Girl to Adam Warlock, right? You don't really want to go from Groot to Mantis. Not really. You want to go to a support that's easier for you to play, and you're going to get more value on them. So I think Cloak is still really good, and in the right hands has probably even higher carry potential than they did last season, but not as meta defining. So that's my justification for putting him in the A tier and not the S. Rocket. I know I'm kind of hyper stacking the A tier here. I got to put Rocket in the A tier. I mean, come on. Rocket is still good. He won a lot last season with a really high pick rate. He has still had a really high win rate. And he's just really good. And I keep talking about why he's so good. People wonder why I'm so high on Rocket. And it's really just because when someone gets picked first in a fight, it decides a fight a giant percentage of the time. At least that was true in Overwatch, and I have no reason to not believe it was true in Rivals, where someone dying first on either side is bad, right? Losing an advantage right off the bat. That person's not going to build ultimates. You're going to be fundamentally weaker. You're going to have less pressure. You're going to have less resources. It makes sense, right? So having an ability that is not about, you know, surviving ultimates or not about denying big plays, but just wiping away a pick that could have cost you the game. And it doesn't even necessarily feel like that did cost you the game, but often it does. When your Spider-Man just runs in and dies instantly, that could just cost you the whole game. You're down one person in pressure. When your Luna Snow gets dove and murdered instantly by a Black Panther, you just lose that fight in a lot of cases. But if you have an Adam Res, you actually could win that fight. And that's why it's so strong, where that BRB can be something that just completely wins you a fight, and you don't even really notice it. People say, what are you doing, Rocket? Well, actually, we had 3 more fights that we wouldn't have had if I wouldn't have been around, right? And also, Rocket is a character that just doesn't die. He doesn't get farmed. A good Rocket has good mobility. He's hard to interact with. He's hard to dive. So when you think about that, a character that's going to have very little deaths and is going to prevent team fight losses just with an ability, who cares about his amplifier? I think amplifier is a fine ability, a fine ultimate, but who cares about it when you're winning fights, or you're getting, you know, 4 or 5 more fights in a game that you wouldn't have gotten? You would have just lost. You would have just crumbled if you didn't have BRB. I think people just really underestimate that. And I want to make it clear that I think Rocket is great. And then not to mention his synergy with characters like Bucky, with characters like Punisher. You gotta give credit where credit's due. Rocket is an A-tier support. I really do think he is. Last up, Invisible Woman. Invisible Woman stocks have massively risen. I do understand that Invisible Woman got her ultimate nerfed, not as easy to charge, but nothing else about the character has gotten changed. And the character has already kind of proven herself to be very, very good. And Invisible Woman is a character that is just insane against so many different things. Whether you're shutting down a Wolverine, whether you're denying an enemy DPS play, whether you're messing up, you know, a dive, whether you're pushing away Eye of Agamotto or pulling tanks in and out of position so that you could potentially kill them, to shielding your flyers or shielding your DPS that are taking duels, or ulting, and you have a very good ultimate, a very reliable ultimate. You're also very hard to kill because you can go invisible, and you can do a lot of damage as well as doing a lot of heals, and you can fulfill the burst tier capacity. I think Invisible Woman is fantastic. Okay, all right, no pun intended. But this character is great. This character is so good, and one of the best supports in the game. I think she's top 2, and yeah, she's just so good. A lot of people have been sleeping on this character, but I really do think that she provides everything that you could want out of a support and more. And yeah, I think she's an S tier character. And this is kind of my definitive list for mid to high elo. I think that you could justify the movement of a couple of these characters depending on the rank you're in and depending on the skill level. Like, we could move some of these characters down and some of these characters down or up or whatever, but really, this is my list. And I think it's fairly accurate as far as what is played, what is strong, what is viable. And really, if you have any questions, concerns, or disagreements, I want to hear your opinion about it in the comments down below, because I know I'm objectively correct. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but sorry if I sounded a little off in this video. I am still sick. I'm recovering. I hope I recover soon fully, because I'm really tired of being sick, and I've been sick for way too freaking long. Guys, take care of yourself. Stay healthy. Please don't get sick. Hydrate. Get good rest. That's the most important thing, is being well, having good health. So anyways, thank y'all for coming by. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like and subscribe if you did.